Welcome to Bodhi Learning Hub. Do you know about electoral bonds? These bonds are essentially anonymous donations made to political entities. Introduced by the Finance Bill of 2017 and notified on January 29, 2018, they've been a topic of heated discussion. Electoral bonds can be purchased by anyone, be it an individual or a corporation, from the State Bank of India. They come in denominations of 1,000, 1,000, 1 lakh, 10 lakh, and 1 crore rupees. Once purchased, these bonds can be donated to any registered political party. The catch is that the identity of the donor remains confidential. These bonds also come with an expiration date, staying valid for a mere 15 calendar days from the date of issue. Only political parties that secured at least 1% of votes in the last general election to the House of the People or the Legislative Assembly of the state are eligible to receive these bonds. Electoral bonds, thus, are a unique form of political contribution veiled in confidentiality. Controversy is no stranger to politics, and electoral bonds have found themselves at its heart. The Supreme Court of India recently declared the electoral bonds scheme unconstitutional, stirring quite a debate. The court's reasons were multifaceted, but let's take a closer look at a few key points. Firstly, the court held that the scheme violates the right to information. Here's why. The scheme keeps the source of funding for political parties hidden from the public. This anonymity of donors is seen as a fundamental breach of the public's right to information under Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution. Furthermore, this secrecy raises concerns about potential avenues for black money, foreign funding, and corporate influence to seep into the political system, thereby jeopardizing public interest and national sovereignty. The second reason given by the court was the violation of the principle of equality. This might seem a bit abstract at first, but let's break it down. The scheme discriminates between political parties based on their vote share, offering an unfair advantage to the ruling party and major opposition parties, while sidelining smaller and regional parties. Furthermore, it creates disparity between donors and voters. While donors with their concealed identities can potentially sway the policies and decisions of the political parties, voters are kept in the dark. Lastly, the court pointed out that the scheme contradicts the constitutional scheme of electoral reforms. The scheme runs counter to the constitutional aim of curbing corruption and the criminalization of politics. Moreover, it conflicts with the Representation of Peoples Act, 1951, which mandates political parties to disclose their contributions and expenditure. The verdict, thus, brings the constitutionality of electoral bonds under scrutiny. This landmark judgment has set the stage for a thorough reassessment of how politics is funded in India, sparking conversations about transparency, equality, and the very essence of democracy. The ripple effects of this landmark judgment will be felt throughout the political landscape of India. Let's delve into the potential implications of this judgment. The first, and perhaps the most significant, is the enhanced transparency in political funding. With the Supreme Court's directive to the State Bank of India to furnish details of electoral bonds encashed by political parties, there will be a new level of openness. The Election Commission of India will publish these details on its website, opening the doors for public scrutiny. The veil of anonymity once protecting the donors will be lifted, and the public will have access to the information about the source and amount of funding received by the political parties. This transparency brings us to our next point: accountability. The judgment fosters greater accountability of political parties. Now that the public can scrutinize the source and the amount of funding, they can hold the political parties accountable for their performance and conduct. No longer can these parties hide behind obscure funding sources. Their financial backers will be in the public domain, and this could potentially influence their actions and decisions. The third implication is the reduced corporate influence in politics. With the anonymity of donors removed, corporations and individuals can no longer wield influence behind the scenes without public knowledge. This judgment will curb the influence of money and corporate power in politics. The donors will no longer be able to hide their identity and agenda behind the veil of anonymity, preventing political parties from being swayed by vested interests. So, what does this all mean? Essentially, this judgment will shift the balance of power from the corporations and wealthy individuals back to the people. The Supreme Court's decision is a significant step towards a more transparent, accountable, and equitable political system where the influence of money is minimized and the voice of the people is amplified. The judgment signals a significant shift in India's political funding landscape, heralding a future of greater transparency. The saga of electoral bonds is far from over as the debate rages on. As we've delved into throughout this discussion, the concept of electoral bonds brought with it a mix of secrecy, potential for corruption, and an imbalance in the political playing field. But it also presented an innovative approach to funding political parties. We've seen how these bonds, introduced in 2017, allowed for anonymous donations to political parties, how the Supreme Court of India struck down this scheme as unconstitutional, citing a violation of the right to information, the principle of equality, and the constitutional scheme of electoral reforms. And we've considered the potential implications of this judgment on future elections and political funding. Will this ruling bring about the transparency and accountability we yearn for in political funding? It's a possibility. By shining a light on the source and amount of funding received by political parties, we can scrutinize and hold these parties accountable for their performance and conduct. Will it reduce the influence of money and corporate power in politics? It might. By stripping away the veil of anonymity that donors have been able to hide behind, we could prevent political parties from being swayed by vested interests. But it's important to remember that this is just one step in a long journey toward electoral reform. There are still many miles to travel and many battles to fight, and each one of us has a role to play in this journey. This brings us to the end of our discussion on electoral bonds. But the conversation doesn't have to stop here. We invite you to share your thoughts on this topic. Join the conversation in the comments below. Your opinion matters.